Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Voxology Podcast. Mike, Erie, Timothy, Stafford. We're your hosts with the most, and we're very excited today. Tim's got the house by himself. And so as surprising as it is, I'm a huge introvert. And then whatever huge introvert I am, Tim is even huger. So the idea of an empty house for several days. Tim, tell us just a little bit about how you're going to fill some of that time.
Well, I had therapy this week, so I got a lot of directives. I have to do a bunch of painting, but I have to lean into like...
Oh, is that why you wanted me to send you some candid photos?
Yes. I'm going to paint you like one of my French girls, or however that's said in that movie. The Titanic. It's the often parodied line. Oh, I actually saw a pastor saying that he was at Disneyland or something, and they were all doing like the character sketches, and he sat down and said that line thinking that everybody knows it, which apparently not everybody does.
I don't know that.
Kate Winslet, Leo.
Oh.
Sinking ship. Kind of like this joke.
Yeah, I mean, it rings a bell. Yeah.
But she told me I'd have to paint out of my intuition, which I don't understand what that means. So I have to figure that out.
Yes.
But
my advice is to, if you've got mushrooms anywhere on your property, go ahead and ingest those.
Yeah.
And then let your intuition lead you.
Go to Wonderland. Hey, Mike, happy Pearl Jam Day.
Okay, that was one of the things I wanted to bring up today. It's been a good week musically for the Tim and Mike crowd of two. Pearl Jam released their second song off the forthcoming album, and it's a banger, as Nate would say. It's so good. It's so good. I've just listened to it, I don't know, probably 20 times. I'm pulling a Seth theory on these songs. And then Tenacious D, Jack Black, who we love.
Just a treasure.
They did a cover of Hit Me Baby One More Time. It's so good. Seth loves it. So when wherever he and I are in the truck together, we're belting that out.
I used to cover that song all the time. I actually played it recently. Because it's
just an acoustic.
Yeah, acoustic and like a minor key, because the lyrical content's really, really dark.
Yeah.
And then, you have whatever, I don't remember how old she was when she put that out, but it was like the bouncing around the hallways and, very, very poppy. But like there's some weird Swedish dude that wrote like all those songs for.
Dude, I'm telling you, ABBA kids. And that dude, there's a sound. I think like there was one Britney song way back in the day that sounded like it could have been an ABBA song. It's just that same sort of pop content, chord progression. I just love it. So anyway, but Jack Black, bro, covering all that is fantastic.
His feed during COVID when he kept dressing up as all the different superheroes at his house and like, it's just the best.
Yeah, there's some people that just need Secret Service agents because they're awesome.
Just have to keep them protected at all costs.
He might be one of them. Do you like the new Pearl Jam?
I do. I think it's fun. It's a lot of energy and
a lot of energy. It reminds me a little bit of Spin the Black Circle.
Yeah, the production quality is a little weird on the record so far. I'd be curious to see how the whole thing sounds when it comes out.
It's going to sound like this. I think it's going to sound like this.
It's real muddy.
It's a very different Pearl Jam sound.
Yeah. I mean, I love that they're drumming up the energy. There's that, and then also I've been waiting on pins and needles for the Beetlejuice trailer, and that came out yesterday.
There it is.
Also.
There it is. Yep, that's your movie.
Big day.
Big day. Ladies and gentlemen, so if you're just wondering how we're doing, we should probably have a fast forward option for this section. We're doing great. We're doing great. We do have a couple things in the news to discuss. And shocking, there are people on the internet saying things that we would disagree with. There's a fellow by the name of Charlie Kirk, who I'm not super familiar with. Like, I guess he's a younger conservative voice or whatever. And you said he's like speaking at Promise Keepers.
He's one of the headliners this year. There's a bunch of controversy because it was like him and Dr. Phil, but they're guys who have opinions are not super constructive all the time, and
those are
favor
people
a certain demographic of people.
I want, inspiring me towards Jesus. Absolutely.
Sounds like a bad TV show.
Well, I don't know anything about Charlie Cook. I mean, certainly Dr. Phil and I bear a passing resemblance to each other.
You should grow a big mustache.
And I mean,
Be the
it's possible.
anti-Phil.
And I'm Dr. Pill. And so don't know what that means. But I saw this post floating around, or this clip of at a church, and it's Charlie Kirk at a church saying, if you vote Democrat as a Christian, I think you can no longer call yourself a Christian. You have to call yourself something else. I do not think you can be a Christian and vote Democrat. And you know, I have thoughts about such things as this sort of nonsense gets periodically distributed around. And I know people who are on the other side of that equation who would say you cannot be a Christian and vote Republican. I mean, with the same level of ferocity. And so, well, it's identity formation, right? The primary identity now, the primary way we identify ourselves these days is through our political and tribal affiliations. And you know, we've said this line for years, like we have, as Jesus people, we have more in common with a Jesus person on the other side of the political aisle than we do with a non-Jesus follower who agrees with us politically, right? I mean, that's the picture of the New Testament is that followers of Jesus are siblings who have one Lord, one faith, one baptism in common. And the tribal markers outside of that are completely secondary. But man, we've been so discipled to not see the world that way, even in the church. And that's what really the problem is, right? If somebody wants to say, listen, I don't think you can follow Jesus and vote this way, okay. I mean, I totally disagree with you because, interestingly enough, Jesus never made party affiliation a requirement for his kingdom, and I certainly would disagree because with the idea that somehow one political party or another completely equates to or negates the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is operating at such a higher, deeper, and more political level than our petty partisan politics. Where it just drives me crazy that people don't understand what is it that makes us Christian. And you know, it's coming now to be as somebody who teaches in a church. I mean, people, no one approaches the Bible with, hey, I wonder what the scripture says on this issue. We come with fully formed opinions, and then we're just looking for people who will, affirm those opinions from the text. So, I mean, this is just yet another symptom of the idolatry that has captivated the American church. That we would make tribal, political, partisan affiliations a gate for whether or not you can actually follow Jesus either direction. And I'm not saying I agree. My daughter and I, she is 18. She has got a great head on her shoulders. We were talking through what we thought about all sorts of big controversial issues, and neither one of us aligned perfectly with the progressive vision or the conservative vision, right? Because of our prior commitment to the biblical text. And I think the part I grieve so much is because people like this guy are saying these kinds of things, we have to respond and say the other thing, which is it's just not true. That's what idolatry actually ends up looking like. That's when you've been corrupted by the worldly system of the age, rather than coming into the worldly system of the age as a Jesus follower who seeks the reconciliation of all things and all people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So this stuff drives me nuts, Tim, is what I'm trying to say. And because I have no interest in sitting and talking about the partisan politics of the day. I just don't. I don't think America needs saving. I think the kingdom of God is coming. That's what I'm much more excited about. And Jesus didn't die to offer us a better version of the kingdoms of the world. He's offering us something entirely different. And great, let's have our opinions about the best party or what you should do with your one and only vote or whatever. Hallelujah. It's just when that gets wedded to the term Christian, it corrupts it all. It doesn't corrupt the politics. It makes them more powerful, but it certainly corrupts the Christian side of that whole equation. And so I don't know, man. I get so disappointed that formation now exists almost entirely through a political lens. Like even that we, our friend shared with us an idea of the raunchy evangelicals. Here are evangelical Christians who are, influencers on Instagram who are showing lots of skin, or they're vulgar in the public square. And it's like, what does evangelical even mean? That's not even a word that means anything anymore to me. That's a political voting block of which I am not a part. So I don't know. I was just frustrated. And then you chimed in with some Taylor Swift news. And let's be clear, if we're going to talk about Charlie Kirk and the heinousness of whatever he was saying, we got to deal with T Swift, guys, because I didn't know this. I read those articles you sent, but what is all this nonsense about having demonic like rituals at her concerts or whatever? Like there's a whole sub thing of like she's polluting the minds of children or something. And I just thought she was really looking for love in all the wrong places.
I think so. She is looking
so
for
Tim,
love.
give us T Swift. What's going on here?
Well, it was a barrage of things. There was that article. It was in I can't remember which magazine that one was in, that was talking about
the Christian Post.
The Christian Post was going off about her demonic and Satan worshiping imagery because people wear hoods and there's songs that are dealing with darker subject matter, the blah, blah, blah. But that article is one of like a ton of people going after her for that. So I was just reading that. I was trying to think about it in regards to like, well, there's obvious like sensationalized versions of that where you think about like the witch hunts and what happened to women during that time period, which we just kind of brush into like a weird category of history, but it's a very, very dark thing where women spoke up and when I reread The Crucible last year and we watched the movie and it was just, we're like, good Lord, my wife and I are just sitting there bawling on the couch thinking about how a lot of the implications of this are still the same of and I know this sounds sensational again, but the stuff with Charlie Kirk and stuff does not feel that far from that, because a lot of the Crucible was wedding like masculine Christian ideals of power, and when women showed any ability to speak or whatever, it was the easiest thing to say they're evil, they're the devil, and they burned them alive. And it's like, that's just insane. So it seems far from where we are, but at the same time, it's like public crucifixions. You know what I mean? Like they're going after Taylor hard because she has a platform. But when I think about like what you're just talking about,
listen, she's not of the devil, bro. She is an operative of the Biden administration and the deep state.
They say both, right? Well, and then they're all tied together. It's all satanic and it's all serving the devil, and Biden's a lizard and whatever else. But
totally.
Anyway, the gatekeeping idea of definitions, like who gets to define who's a Christian and who's not, and by what standards and scruples. And totally, like you, like I evangelicals meant nothing to me for a long time, even Christian to a large extent. I'm just not trying to think in those terms anymore. I'm trying to think about how do I live into this kingdom stuff that we've been talking about. So when I look at Taylor Swift, she is just, what is the fruit from what she does most of the time? It's been like hospitality and generosity and advocating for people. And she's one of the most generous musicians out there with her crew and the different people around her, and with her fans, and with tragedy amongst her fans. And so I don't know. And then, so the other article too is, just to tie it back to the beginning, was Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam, talking about how taking his daughters to the Taylor Swift concerts, and how he's like, man, it really reminded me of like the early punk scene where it was all about inclusivity and all these people getting together and being generous to each other. And they all make those bracelets ahead of time, and they share those bracelets with each other. And it's just this communal thing where I think maybe part of the threat is that it looks like it does church better than church does sometimes. because everyone is there connecting, and just there's so much joy and hope and these different things. I don't know what it is, but I'd also, then I texted you and made me think about when we had Beth Allison Barr on, and she was talking about like just the pushback from the capital C church on women over the different eras. And I remember I asked her, like, it seemed like it coincided with the different eras of feminism. And she's like, oh, I think you might be right. And so I started thinking about that. She was like, anytime a woman gets any amount of power, man, the white Christian men come out of the woodwork to tear it down. And it's like, what is our fear of women? And then, so all of that stuff I just find endlessly fascinating. You can watch a bunch. She's got great documentaries on Disney. You can watch her advocate for what she thinks, and you can watch her profess her faith within that. So she claims to be a Christian. Charlie Kirk claims to be a Christian. I'm going to look at the fruit from those two people. Not that I care. I'm not gonna get in a debate and walk around with a shirt that says Charlie Kirk's not a Christian. I don't care. Although the Promise Keeper thing, when you think about him, he pushes white nationalist ideas and tying the church and politics together. His whole platform is that turning point thing.
I don't know. Yeah.
So when you think about Promise Keepers and putting tens of thousands of men into a thing and then advocating, which I'm assuming is going to happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice.
A tie of Christianity to American politics, you're going to get a lot of riled up men within that demographic.
Well, there was also a quote about him saying, if we lose this election, we should be ready to fight. And I don't know the context of that, but it's that kind of idea that follows. And the thing you sent me that, Sean, what's your buddy's name? Sean Foyt.
Again, Taylor Swift rant.
Yeah, Taylor Swift rant. And I was watching that out of respect for you. I don't go looking for these things. Okay. Just to be honest, Tim will often send us things and be like, I know you don't want to watch this, but here, see me. And I was just sitting and thinking about what it's like to live in a Christianity that's always under threat.
Yeah.
And that I used to resonate a little bit with some of that. I remember when political correctness first became a thing, and it was like, oh, we're not going to be able to, say this or that or whatever. But how much people in our world like prey on the Christians are threatened idea. And so here's, with Taylor, not only is somebody, she's a supreme influence over a demographic coveted by the church, young folks. But, I wonder if it's like the doing church better than we do church. But I'm also thinking about how there's a Christianity that always has to look outward for threats to its existence.
Yeah.
And when I read the New Testament, almost all the threats are inside.
Totally.
And obviously there are some threats outside, right? Revelation, we talked about, there's the beginning of persecution, but it wasn't persecution that was the threat. It was compromise that was the threat.
Right.
It wasn't being persecuted that was the issue. It was compromising so you're not persecuted. That was the issue. And that came from inside the church.
Yeah. And
so for me, I don't sit around and interrogate our world looking for all of the ways it leads people astray. The thing that I'm constantly interrogating is my community, and my community, the lenses through which me and my community receive information about the world and are formed by it, in ways that would inhibit our faithfully imaging Jesus, right? So that's what I'm constantly interrogating. I'm constantly interrogating the church. I'm not constantly interrogating the world. So I don't feel threatened by Taylor Swift, or was it there's some woman next to her at the Super Bowl who had like a upside down cross or something? I have no idea, but it was referenced. It was referenced in all of this. And it's like, okay, I mean, yeah, do I want all of that stuff glorified? No, but I think the much larger issue is when the church, as Jesus, talked about, when the church loses its saltiness, it becomes good for nothing and thrown out. And that's really where we're at. Like there isn't a marked difference between the priorities and values of the church and the spirit of the age in either direction, the progressive or the conservative visions. And so to me, I want to be somebody who does not see Christianity under threat. The kingdom of God cannot be shaken. Anytime you try to stamp it out, it just grows. If we've learned anything from human history, we've learned that, right? The minute you try to crush it, it explodes. And so I want to be a part of a movement that operates from a place of peace and security, not of fear and scarcity. And I just think you get two rival Christianities depending on where you start in that equation.
Yeah,
you know
like
what I mean?
3 or
Like
4.
yeah, and that's why if I'm going to call somebody out, it's going to be a so-called Christian gatekeeping other Christians rather than Taylor Swift, whatever she's doing in her concerts. You know what I mean? Like when
Yeah, when
Paul
she's not
says,
advocating
"Who?"
to be the Christian leader of,
Totally.
you
When
know what I
Paul says,
mean?
"Who am I to judge those outside the church? I judge those inside."
Yeah.
And I heard this from a guy named Andy Stanley years ago, and it made it. So I don't always. He's a pragmatist, and so I don't always buy his pragmatism. But he had a great line. He said, "What if we just started expecting Christians to act like Christians and non-Christians act like non-Christians?" And for some reason, that stuck in me and morphed into the idea that it's the log in my own eye that's the issue. Um, that's the bigger issue rather than the speck in everyone else's. And so I want to interrogate me and my community and the lens through which we are receiving and seeing the world rather than querying the world for all of the bad stuff that's out there, because there's always something more to be afraid of. And that's where we can fundraise and platform raise and all the things from it. I remember one of the things this made me think about. I was at a pastoral staff retreat. I was part of a different church, and we were going to go see one of the Harry Potters.
Yeah.
And I loved the books. I've read them multiple times. We were going to go see one of the movies, and there was a guy there on our staff who was from Africa. He'd born and raised in Africa. And he had a completely different take on Harry Potter. He said, and I remember we didn't end up going seeing, because he stood up and confronted us and said, "You don't understand how real some of this is. You just don't understand the spiritualist culture I come from, where this has power." And I remember being at war with his thoughts, because on the one hand, I'm sitting there going, really, really, this is like, come on. But on the other hand, here's a fellow believer who comes from a completely different cultural background saying, "Hey, your like Western American individualistic sense of this isn't actually accurate." So, so I want to be open to the possibility that there are things that look neutral but aren't, because that was
Right.
the thing he taught me. But at the same time, my posture, like we talked about with the drinking and the sex question from last week, my posture is trying to be one of discernment, but the focus of the discernment is us inside the church, not for those outside. So I don't know. That was my reaction to the stuff, and I do think it's interesting, Tim, and I can't comment on it because I just don't know that it is. There is a sense of when women grow powerfully in their voice in culture, that there is a counter movement almost always to that gets pretty ugly on the
Well, I told you about the
man
girl that
side.
I follow. So one of them is she's a she's a atheist now, but she grew
Hmm.
up in like the Bethel, like the daughter of one of the main pastors up there.
Hmm.
And she was a worship leader, and got married really young and just has a really tragic story. And because of all that, she has become an atheist. And so her whole platform is pushing back on everything Christian. But the
Hmm.
stuff that she pushes back on is that distorted version of things. And
Hmm.
it's the version that she has come to know, and it's the version that she has experienced a ton of abuse and harm in.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it makes perfect sense that she pushes back on that. But then she'll highlight the comments and responses that she gets from men on there, and just being like, look,
Oh,
this is exact, and they are gnarly. And
yeah.
it'll just be these like
Yep.
Christian men who think it's their duty to beat her down and tell her how demonic and evil and stuff she is. And she's just like, see, this is exactly why I don't believe in this God. And it's just like, but even more with the politics stuff too, like and we're in that season right now of trying to figure out how to exercise your, your duty as an American citizen while being a citizen of this kingdom at the same time. And so obviously all these debates are sparking up, and everyone's trying to claim the Christian leader role within politics, so that we will follow behind whatever they're doing. I'm so tired of every argument and debate, because or like the debate and argument over Israel and Palestine, while we all kind of shuffle around trying to figure out how to have a stance on this. There's thousands and thousands of people dying. And so that's an extreme version of that. But I look at all these arguments, and all I see is the most marginalized people always being fodder within the conversations, while people on the top are just arguing over who has the best version of it. And it's like, man, we're doing is hurting more and more people. So I'm really interested in this season of how to find that balance of, yes, I still have to be a part of this system because I am a part of this system. But at the same time, I have to learn how to like make sure that everybody is included in that, or everyone is safe within that, or whatever it is. I'm not sure how to word that, but it's like, that's what I'm seeing the most is just so many people getting hurt and falling on the wayside, which feels very antithetical to everything we supposedly believe as Americans or as Christians.
Yeah. Amen. So let me, I've got a thought about who to follow in these times, and his name is Seth Erre. Yesterday, World Down Syndrome Day, which I love there's such a thing. And that's why I don't oppose other like world thing days. Like, great. Black history or women's or whatever, like awesome, right? Representation matters. And so we got March 21st, 321 and extra chromosome. And we got 3 on the 21st chromosome is the idea. So it's 321, which is perfect. And I was thinking about our conversation. Seth Erre teaches me all kinds of things. If you're new to the podcast, my son has Down syndrome. And he chirps and chimes all over the place, loves the Voxology community. He's a dog, as my Nate would say. I was thinking about what Genesis means and how Genesis plays out in real life. So, we had a theological conversation last week at Genesis 1 about human beings being the image of God. And so we have to distinguish between the noun and the verb of that, because there are 2 things being said here. One is that we are images of God. We are the noun. We are images. It's something we are, not something we do. And it's also the verb. We image God. Part of what we do as nouns is we verbify. so part of what I do as an image, as a noun, is I verb image. I image things into the world.
Yeah.
Right? That's so that's a really big way that image gets used throughout the rest of the Bible. Is on the one hand, we're all image bearers, but on the other hand, we don't all image God into the world. And so we want to start by looking at the noun of that statement, that image are something we are. We are God's image, not something we do. And so if you remember last week, and this will tie into Seth here in just a few moments, but image, like the word selim, image, is just the word for a localized statue. I mean, it's a physical piece of material that would be placed in a temple. And images, that those words were usually affixed to either kings, who were images of gods, or temple statues, which were images of the kings or the gods. So the only people that were images were kings or gods, is kind of the idea. And so when God decrees, let us make humanity in our image and our likeness, that's a very ancient way of saying image bearers, the humans, now represent the royal office. It's a king word. the royal office and calling upon human beings, right? That they are Yahweh's representatives and agents in the world, granted limited power to affect will and action into the world, right? And so what we're going to explore, that's a very deep implication for what it means to be human agency. We'll get to that later. But for now, I just want to hold in front of us the idea that, okay, Genesis starts with the essentialist claim that in our being we are images. Now, as images, we do imaging, but the reason this matters is because some people will say you're only an image insofar as you image well.
Right.
So they'll reduce the noun to the verb. Right, you are an image,
and then they'll define the verb, or at least what that looks
exactly.
like. Yeah,
exactly. That's where we're going with this sucker. So the claim is that we not only are images and we image. We're mirrors essentially that are reflecting whatever it is that we worship back into the world. Which is, ultimately what idolatry turns out to be, is that we're imaging something other than the Creator. So there are different theological views of what it means to be in the image of God. All right, we're going to look at 4 of them, and then we're going to argue the Seth Erie route. The first one is called the substantive view, and it's the idea that the image of God is found in some characteristic or definitive quality within the makeup of human beings. So one of the ways you get to this view is, well, how are humans different than animals? Animals eat, we eat, animals reproduce, we produce. Animals don't have a moral nature. So, that's image of God. Animals don't have an immaterial soul, at least as far as we know. That's image of God. So image of God gets spelled out in something that's unique to humans that no other creature has. And so you'll hear this view, and like the image of God consists in our moral nature. In choosing right and wrong and having an awareness of right and wrong. Or it is construed in terms of our spiritual nature, that there is an invisible part to us. I can lose body parts, but not lose me, right? I'm more than just my body. I can relate to God, an invisible being, right? I can worship. For some, it's the mental nature of human beings that's different. Abstract reasoning, complex and abstract language, a sense of past and future, creativity, painting from intuition, if you will. So substantive, that view says there's something about humans that makes them different from and stand out from all the rest of creation. And so it's moral nature, something about our minds, whatever. So that's one view of what it means to be in the image of God, is there's something about us that's unique.
Yeah.
The relational view of the image of God says, well, what's unique about human beings is their ability to know and be known by other beings. And so it's not an intellectual set of capacities, but it's a relational set of capacities. And we see this, man, obviously in the fact that friendship and loyalty are so highly valued no matter what culture. Like fidelity is something we always treasure. Marriage is among the most sacred of our sort of institutions or whatever, right? We have this relational nature. And because God is a relational being, we made in the image of God because now we are relational beings. Does that make sense? So the first view says, hey, there are qualities about humans that separate them from animals, and that's what it is to be in the image. Another view says, well, one of those is the fact that we're relational beings. God is at essence a relational being, a 3-in-1 sort of being. And so here we are made in the image of God. There's another view called the functional view, which is we have a sense from observing humans how they're supposed to function.
Right.
And here it's the verb view. Human beings are images when they do imaging. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're the peak image when we're actually doing the imaging itself.
Right. And so this is not religious language, but in 1972, there have been, this is in the history of ethics, there have been loads of proposals put forward about when or what is a human being? When does a human being actually become human?
Right.
Obviously, in the abortion debate, also in the euthanasia debate,
Mm-hmm.
if someone's in a coma, are they still human?
Yeah.
And so early on in this debate, I think it was early 70s, somebody put forward a 15-point criteria for a human being. And it was minimal intelligence, the IQ of at least 40, self-awareness, self-control, a sense of time, a sense of futurity, like a sense of future, a sense of the past, the capacity to relate to others, concern for others, communication, control of one's existence, curiosity, change and changeability, balance of rationality and feeling, idiosyncrasy,
Hmm.
and then the neocortical brain functioning. That the capacity exists for all of the things that were just mentioned. The implication of a list like that is if some of those things are missing, then you're not fully human, right?
Hmm.
That's why it's called the functional view, is because when you cease functioning as a human, you're no longer a human. A different version of this comes from a guy named Peter Singer, who very famously, I think it was 1980 maybe, argued against the personhood of a fetus on the basis of this view. He wrote, "I have argued that the life of a fetus is of no greater value than the life of a non-human animal at a similar level of rationality, self-consciousness, awareness, capacity to feel, etc." Now remember, he's doing this, he's measuring capacities, right? Functions. So, hey, if a human fetus has the same functionality as a non-human animal, well, okay, aren't they of the same worth? That's the idea. Now, it must be, he says, "I have argued that the life of a fetus is of no greater value than the life of a non-human animal at a similar level of rationality, self-consciousness, awareness, capacity to feel, etc. And that since no fetus is a person, no fetus then has the same claim to life as a person. Now, it must be admitted that these arguments apply to the newborn baby as much as they do to the fetus. If the fetus does not have the same claim to life as a person, it appears that the newborn baby does not either, and that the life of a newborn baby is of less value than the life of a pig, a dog, or a chimpanzee, who have greater functionality in terms of rationality or, whatever." And this is where the functional view, this is where it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problems here are legion. Like, who gets to determine what criteria?
Right.
Somebody wrote, well, here's my 15-point list. Well,
Right.
okay, what if I have a 16th, or what if I only have 13? It seems subjective. And this gets into the issue of conception, right? When does life begin? When does the zygote become a person, right? And
It
so
also
we're
gets
just
into
offering
weird things like eugenics or like.
Oh yes, we're
Yeah.
going. Oh yeah, this is where Seth Erre comes in. Because on some of these accounts, Seth Erre is disregarded as a full and functioning human being, right? If his intelligence isn't X, Y, or Z, or he's not fully able to care for himself or whatever. So, but I want to critique each of the views, right? The subjective view or the substantive view says, oh no, it's some part of a human that reflects the image. It's a part of the human, not just the human as a human. The relational view says it's the relational part of the human. The functional view says it's the functional part of the humans. And then we try to spell out what that is. The problem with the functional part is the criteria are always subjective. And how do you express, like, it's impossible to quantify, like, how smart someone is or how self-aware. Like when you say one of the criteria for humans is the capacity to relate to others. Well, what measurement do you put on that?
Yeah.
What measurement do you put on concern for others? Like if they ask 2 questions, per 30 minutes. I mean, there's just, it's so ethereal, that there's nothing to it. It's just, then it just becomes a power thing. Who has the power to decide?
Mm-hmm.
We hold, and I think Genesis 1 teaches something called the ontological view, which is that humans, in virtue of being humans, are images. So that every human is an image. And every image is a human. And so that's the part where, you'll get all this stuff in later in Torah saying, don't make other images of God. And as we saw last week, it's the reason is because there already are some.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and this is from Amy something or other. She wrote a book called Being God's Image or Why Sinai Matters or something. But this is a money quote. Regardless, Carmen something Imes.
What's
Yes,
the name? I know.
there it is. We reference her. I think it's Being God's Image or according to the Bible, human beings aren't just made in the image of God; they are the image of God. So that rules out all the three other views. Right? They're not made in the image in their moral capacity or their relational capacity or their function capacity. Carmen Imes. Did I not say this?
Yeah.
Carmen Joy. Is that where I got the joy? Is it Carmen Joy Imes?
Almond Joy?
Anyway, she says, the Imago Dei, the image of God, is concrete. Like a statue that represents a king or a deity, humans represent Yahweh to creation. Being God's image is our human identity. It is not something we bear, it is something we are. So that becomes really important in the implication. So from birth to death, human beings are all made in the image of God, right? They're all image bearers.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they're talking or they're walking or they're speaking or they're mute, or it doesn't matter if they have anything. In virtue of being a human, they are images of God. And we saw from last week, how you treat the image is how you treat the deity. That's why, John will say things like, if you claim to love God and hate your brother and sister, you're a liar, and the truth is not in you. That's why Jesus will say, love God, love neighbor. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And the whole Torah rests on just that. That is the basis of all biblical, ethical, discussion, is that
everything
human
else
beings.
Is commentary.
That's it. Human beings image God. And implication number 2 is that the image of God is in human as human, not merely some element that can be lost or gained.
Can you say that again?
Yes, the image of God in humanity is humanity as humanity, not in some element in humanity or particular manifestation, right? So image isn't something you gain or lose on the basis of whether or not you're in a coma or on the basis of whether you're paralyzed. Not only that, although humans can reflect the image of God, and there's the verb, they can image God better or poorly than other humans. They still are images completely, regardless of how well or poorly they do the verb. They image. Make sense?
Yeah.
And then here's the big one, or here's one of the big ones, that even after the fall, we still image God. So you get a bunch of ethical statements that are post Genesis 3 about being made in the image of God. So when God created humanity, he made them in the likeness of God. This is Genesis 5. God created them male and female and blessed them, and he named them humanity when they were created. When Adam lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and named him Seth. Ooh, I wonder where the name of Seth came from. Right? So image and likeness language can be used of offspring, interestingly enough. But then Genesis 9, after the flood, Noah, you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood, if anyone takes your life, I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal and from every human being too. I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Why? And then there's this poetic refrain. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made humanity. This is post-fall, right? Or in the book of James, James is talking about the power of speech, the power of the tongue. And he says, with the tongue, we praise our God and Father, And with it, we curse human beings who've been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come both praise and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. So even though we are fallen and we image in the verb form poorly, we are still images of God in our humanness. Make sense?
Yeah.
So, and again, for some of us, this is like no duh. But when you have a boy like Seth, who by some definitions does not qualify, like this gets really tangible, because for us, we found out he had Down syndrome before he was born, and so we were obviously given the option to abort. And we've talked about abortion before, so we're not going to get into that whole topic. But we were far enough along that it was obviously not even a question, that we were going to receive him however he came. But there are Scandinavian countries where Down syndrome is almost entirely eradicated because they test so early, and it's considered, almost it would be considered socially unacceptable to bring someone like that into the world in some countries. So this for me has legs. This for me matters. Because in some ways, I think Seth Erie does the verb better than most of us. Now, one of the things that is attached, and we're going to note this now and come back to it later, but in the Genesis account, is that they're made in the image and likeness of God so that they may rule. Now, this is where we get into some of the functional language, all right? But ruling isn't the image. It's what the image is supposed to do when it's doing its job, right? So again, image is a kingly word. Rule is a kingly word. And so the images are supposed to rule. And grammatically in Hebrew, it's really interesting because it's so many of the things that are in Genesis 1 are in the jussive form. Are you familiar with that in grammar and syntax? A jussive it's almost invitational. Instead of God saying, light, come forth, let there be light is jussive. It's almost an invitational sort of command form. So let us make humanity in our image and let them rule. Like it's something we'll see later. It speaks of God royally decreeing, but it's kind of like when the king says, "Hey, let the feast begin." It's a command, but it's a command of invitation rather than a command of coercion.
Yeah, like not eat now or else.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason the jussives matter is when you're given a couple of jussives in a row, let us make humanity in our image and let them rule. It's telling you that this is a purpose statement. They're being made in the image so that they will rule. So the other animals are told to be fruitful and multiply. Humans are being told to be fruitful and multiply. So that's not what the humans are supposed to be. That's not their unique role in the world.
Right.
But they're supposed to the verb form, rule. So imaging, as images, they rule. And that's going to become really important because what we're supposed to see here, at least in Genesis 1, is a stick of dynamite that we can't appreciate thousands of years later. Here's the stick of dynamite. Who are the only beings called images in the ancient world? Right? We identified them early on in this little here podcast. Kings were images and statues of gods were images. Mm-hmm. That was it. The stick of dynamite that Genesis launched into the ancient world is that every single human person has that divine and royal identification, sanctity, and vocation. That's the stick of dynamite. J. Richard Middleton says it this way. It is the claim of Genesis 1 that God granted a royal priestly identity as Imago Dei, image of God, to all humanity. Whereas power in the Babylonian and Assyrian empires was concentrated in the hands of a few, power in Genesis 1 is diffused or shared. No longer is the image of God only applied to a privileged elite. Rather, all human beings, male and female, are created as God's royal stewards, entrusted with the privileged task of ruling on God's behalf. This democratizing, that's the word, this democratizing of the image of God in Genesis constitutes an implicit critique of the entire royal and priestly structure of ancient Mesopotamian society. That stick of dynamite number one is that human beings in their humanness are image bearers. Stick of dynamite number two, all the humans are image bearers, not just the kings, not just the royal statues, all of them, bro. Now, the functional view that we talked about from, earlier made its way into the ancient world in a lot of different forms. There were always debates about the kind of child you would keep versus the kind of child that you would give up. Mm-hmm. So when we fast forwarded to the Roman Empire around the time of Jesus, thereafter, there was a practice called the exposure of infants. And there's a lot of literature written on this. And to expose an infant means that an infant would be born into a family, and that the head of the family, usually the man, the oldest man, would welcome the child into his arms or turn his back on the child, in which case the child would then be left to be exposed to the elements. So we have records in Ephesus. There was a hill where you would leave unwanted infants. And they could be unwanted for many, many reasons. Some were gender, if it was a girl. Some were too many mouths to feed and the pregnancy was accidental. Some was any physical or mental disability. You would leave those kids to be exposed. You would leave them clothed, but ultimately wild animals, or as terrible as that is, even worse, slavers would rummage around on those places and take the girls for prostitutes, the boys for slaves and prostitution, and so on. I mean, it was just an awful, awful thing. Sparta is the most famous of these ancient societies that was pretty ruthless. But this was all over the thinking of the ancient world. In fact, there's a letter dated from 1 BC, right? So this is time of Jesus stuff. And we have a copy of it. It's from a man called Hilarion, and he's writing to his wife. He had gone ahead to Alexandria, I think on business, and was writing back to her about household affairs. So he says, know that we are still even now in Alexandria. Do not worry if when all others return, I remain in Alexandria. I beg and beseech of you to take care of the little child, and as soon as we receive wages, I will send them to you. If, good luck to you, you have a child, if it's a boy, let it live. If it's a girl, throw it out.
Jeez.
And this was the ancient, this was common. I mean, notice how like matter of fact, that's said. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, we slaughter a fierce or too aggressive ox. We strangle a dog that has rabies. We plunge the knife into sickly cattle, lest we taint the whole herd. Children who are born weakly and deformed, we drown. It's the same rationale, right? Yeah. Why would you let the human race be, or Socrates, as I like to call him from Bill and Ted. The children of inferior parents or any child of the others that is born defective, they'll hide in a secret and unknown place as is appropriate. They'll hide in a secret and unknown place as is appropriate. It is if indeed the guardian breed is to remain pure. Right? So inferior parents, or if there's anything wrong with the kid, you take it to a secret place and leave it there. That's what he's talking about. One of the earliest, and I know you've studied this, Tim, gynecological textbooks of the ancient world. Dr. Sonorus of Ephesus worked in Rome in the 1st and 2nd centuries. He actually wrote a book about how do you know when an infant is worth keeping? Okay, so here was his list. The child should be perfect in all of its parts, limbs and senses, and have passages that are not obstructed, including the ears, nose, throat, urethra, and anus. Its natural movements should be neither feeble nor slow. Its limbs should bend and stretch. Its size and shape should be appropriate, and it should respond to natural stimuli. And then he said, and by conditions contrary to those just mentioned, the infant not worth rearing is recognized. So if the child wasn't perfect in all of its parts, or if it did have orifices that were obstructed or whatever, it didn't respond to natural stimuli, then the child was not worth rearing. One historian puts it this way: the birth of a deformed child was interpreted by the Greeks as a punishment inflicted on its parents by the gods. It therefore follows that the pressure among such parents to expose their offspring must have been considerable, because, right, it was evidence that gods were displeased. Since the Greeks believed that the birth of a healthy and viable infant was dependent upon the goodwill of the gods, it followed that the birth of one who was congenitally deformed was seen as an expression of the gods' ill-word anger. And then Aristotle, as to the raising and exposure of children, let there be a law that no deformed child shall live. So the reason I have studied this is because I have a little boy who, according to those terms, would have been considered a child not worth rearing. And in fact, even if those kids were allowed, they were often put in circuses for the amusement of others, or they were enslaved, or all of the horrible things. So the idea planted in the earliest parts of the Bible, page 1, that every human person, regardless of how well it functions, is made in the image of God, and your treatment of it reflects your treatment of the deity in his image it's made. That's pretty revolutionary stuff. And so when we get into modern discussions about immigration, capital punishment, abortion, I think sometimes we're inconsistent in our application of the idea that every human being is in the image of God. Seth, for me, serves as a prophetic witness against all of those writers, all of those authors, all of that demonic thinking that says that the worth of a human can be measured in efficiency and effectiveness. And so for me, Seth, I mean, I know all the cliche, and he is the cliche. He's a gift. He's changed my life. He's my mentor in the way of Jesus. But the reason these kids need to be brought into the world is because they are a rebuke. They are a rebuke of the power and the principalities and the humans that have cooperated with the powers in the project of determining who qualifies for dignity and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And so, these are bombs of dynamite in the ancient world.
So like in my classroom, what I would do with this conversation is I would ask the kids like to define. So what did you say? Efficiency and effectiveness. And when you were talking earlier, I was just thinking about all of this stuff is based on what our definition of productivity is. And then when it comes to who you do decide to save and platform or advocate for or whatever, they're also terms, they also get tied into how do you control power or whatever, right? Because it'll be like who's the strongest male, basically, is what it's coming down to, are the ones that we want to keep around. Because so you start teasing that out. Why would that be? What kind of things are tied to that?
Yep.
And then I started thinking about Jesus and every different person that he would advocate for that didn't fall into the categories of what we thought was whatever.
That's right.
I mean, any category you can think of from that time period, and the people he ended up advocating for, or saying this person's got a better understanding or idea of this than you do, or because part of the definition of Christian or human for us also comes down to like, we get confused because our definitions are so defined that when we see somebody who's not a Christian living more Christ-like, and in that I mean advocating maybe for the least of these or doing the hard work of really elevating humanity, we get into a weird conundrum. Like, well, they're not doing it right because they are not doing it with the name of Jesus. And it's like, is that it? Is that literally the line?
Yeah. See, we
And
would
if
say,
so,
no,
then no.
they're imaging God. They're imaging God.
So it's like we have to take 3 or 4 steps back to look at all of our definitions or all of our vantage points, because those things are lenses that we look at everything through. And so what you're talking about is rechange or taking those steps back to the first page, like you said, and it redefines all of that.
Totally. What's the problem that Genesis 3 is going to leave us with? Or Genesis 3 through 11? It's that humanity is no longer imaging God.
Yeah.
As image bearers, they're made to image, and they're not imaging God anymore. So that's what needs to be remedied, right? And so Jesus images God perfectly, not in his divinity, but in his humanity. Like that's the whole the whole idea. Now, a question came in on YouTube from last week that I thought was brilliant. Does that mean that human beings are divine, or the deity lives in human beings? And the answer to that is not in the way that sounds. No.
Yeah.
That everyone in the ancient world would have known the statues aren't the gods. You can smash all the statues, but the God remains unaffected. The statues are images of the God.
Yeah.
But they don't. But the destruction of them doesn't affect the existence of the God. So no, we're not divine in any way that like New Age things would argue or whatever. There's one of the very, very important points that Genesis makes is there is an absolute ontological distinction between creator and creature, and that God is everywhere but not in everything. That creation exists as an act of God's will and something outside of God's self. So no, but, and this is where our girl Carmen Imes makes a very helpful distinction between bearing God's image, which is true of all humans, versus bearing God's name or carrying God's name. Remember when we did a reimagining evangelism, we talked about bearing God's name. So God is pulling out of the human tribe of image bearers people who want to image God faithfully into the world. And for them, they carry his name differently. So as a human, I image God. I'm an image of God. As a Jesus follower, God's spirit dwells in me so that I might image Jesus to the world faithfully. Does that make sense? So I can look at people and say, like the person you just described, somebody who has no association with Jesus, but lives an upright, moral, just life. And you're going, they're imaging God. That doesn't mean necessarily that God's like the name of Jesus, they're carrying the name of Jesus into the world. But as humans, we can do much good without the name of Jesus attached. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's okay for us to say that. But there is something else that happens, though, according, to the New Testament, when human image bearers begin to image Jesus into the world, the one true image. And that mode of life is called salvation.
Well, and that brings more into it than just whatever the one thing that person is doing, whether they claim the name of Christian or not.
Right.
This invitation of true humanity and whatever else that Jesus brings with is something. It's like it has more pieces to it than just that one act or whatever, or that one mode of whatever. But just before we end, like when you were talking about in Genesis, like talking about using the terms like ruling, like to be rulers, co-rulers. So we have such a specific understanding of what it means to be a ruler or somebody that's in power. So then you have to redefine that too, because I just when I look at the mess that we're in right now, all these terms we have definitions that are inappropriate. And so, and then we shove all of our faith and how we interact with other people through these corrupted definitions. So it's like we have to redefine almost everything because it's not. Does that make sense? When we look at all the power over in this country, it's all based in this idea, and whether it breaks all the way down to being white and male or not, there are
Right.
always modes of like, because there's been the pushback on women has gotten big again on social media. Christian men. I
Mm.
follow this girl called um, something hillbilly gothic, and she just like takes these videos of men as they're talking about why women shouldn't speak or do any of these things, and she starts playing her banjo over them talking,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
just genius and whatever and simple, but it's one of the sad things that it's highlighting is how much still just like weird
Yeah.
misogyny and but rooted in Christianity. So it's
Mm.
like you see that ruling, you see that power over, you see all those
Yeah.
things as core tenets of our foundation of our tribe. And
Mm-hmm.
then so when you hear we're to be co-rulers, it's like, well, yeah, then we should take the highest seat in the land and we should
Totally.
dictate our faith on everybody. And
Yeah. It's
so,
funny though. It's funny though. And we're going to do a whole thing on rule when we get to it in
okay,
28, which is when he says rule and subdue, because subdue is a violent word. It's kibosh.
it's a better word.
But that's such a good word. Let me just preview this. The humans are told to rule over creation. They're never told to rule over each other. Never. Now, in Genesis 3, it says to the woman, your desire will be for your husband. He will rule over you. We're going to spend so much time when we get there. The word rule there is different than this word.
Mm.
And the reason, thirdly, the justives matter is it's showing how God uses power. God so far has used power to bless, to create, and to give power away.
Mm-hmm.
That's how God's used power. That's why the justives matter. He's not coercing, he's inviting creation to respond. So yes, there's a whole podcast where we're going to explore all of those implications, because you're absolutely right. I mean, we do absolutely see ourselves and have biblical justification for seeing ourselves as lords over.
Yeah. It's our only
Um,
understanding of it.
it's our only understanding, and that's where you see the what we're imaging is actually the serpent, because that gets into the Genesis 3 narrative. How do we image the serpent? When we actually take for ourselves what is good, but we do it apart from God's provision and gift of it. And so, bro, there's just so much this, like, as much as you love the rabbit holes, there are so many rabbit holes.
They seem
But
important though.
but yeah, what does it mean to be human? First, what is Genesis? Genesis is not a scientific textbook. It is doing something so much better than that. Number two, what does it mean to be human? It means to be a selim or demuth, an image or likeness. And it's something you are, it's not something you have or do that you can lose. Thirdly, what does it mean to be human? Every single human, in virtue of being human, is one of these, and therefore worthy of dignity, respect, honor, meaning, value, all the things. So these were sticks of dynamite launched into the soup of the ancient world that, man, reverberate today about how you see kids with special needs, and about how you see people who are in comas, and whether or not plugs should be pulled. And I'm not taking sides on all of that. I'm just saying this has massive ramifications for those sorts of debates. So all that is to say, friends, you're awesome. And we love doing this, and we love being a part of your life. And thank you for letting us be a part of your life. And Tim and Mike, we're just middle-aged guys who have gallbladders, and we're not sure. We're not sure about it. Okay? Unsure. All right. That's all I got.
I hope this is encouraging, though, for anyone who has been made to feel like they're less than for whatever possible reasoning that somebody has ever brought up against you.
Totally.
Of which those are legion.
Yeah. Well, even when we get into like the Greco-Roman views of women, we've talked about they weren't seen as fully human.
Right.
They were partially human. And so this goes back to, and the fundamental orientation we're to have. It's back to, do we see ourselves as under threat? The fundamental orientation I'm to have is to ascribe, and this is Greg Boyd's language, ascribe unsurpassable worth to all of the image bearers that I meet. And that doesn't mean I don't resist evil, and that doesn't mean I don't, say things or whatever. But it does mean, and this is why Jesus does not allow us to condemn each other. Why he rules that out is because discerning is discerning between behaviors, right? That like not every behavior images God well into the world. Condemning is where I make an identity statement against another image bearer.
Mm-hmm.
This person is one of the sheep. This person is one of the goats. This person is an enemy. And that's why that's prohibited, in the kingdom of Jesus. Because even our enemies are to be loved. Why? Because they're made in the image of God. I mean, it's like the logic there is pretty inescapable and we hate it, but that's where Genesis 1 takes us, is that the battle is against flesh and blood.
Yeah, I was thinking about this in regards, for some reason I was thinking about MLK and John Lennon and why they were assassinated.
Of course.
Like, what about their messages brought people to a point where, multiple threats were made on MLK's life. And then I started reading an article that was on how each of the apostles died. And
right?
So, most of them were pretty heinous.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, what was it about their message that led to
right.
That ultimate threat?
Now that's a thread, Tim, you need to pull on. Because what I think we're going to see there the message wasn't, hey, God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. Or, hey, there's a new way to have your sins forgiven. That wasn't that. That was something much more radical that would cause them to be, ooh, that's good, bro.
Well, and what is it that's so threatening about these people's messages overall?
T Swift.
Well, kind of.
I could tell you why T Swift needs to be opposed, because Seth Erre watched Shake It Off video and learned how to twerk. And so I'm not kidding, any circumstance where he's getting attention, he will turn around and shake his booty.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I have to be opposed. I have to oppose all of it. So, and he's really good at it. That's the scary part. He's very limber. So anyway, if you ever see that happening, look away. Look away. Do not laugh. Just encourages him. All right, we're out, Tim. Have a great week. Have a great week, y'all. As they say here in the South. Yep. March Madness, it's in the air. Easter's coming.
As your Tennessee native Taylor Swift would say.
What would she say? Oh, y'all?
Yeah.
Is that what she says? Perfect. Is she native?
I'm pretty sure she's from Tennessee, because she was, when she finally started to get political, pushing back on Marsha Blackburn. She was talking about how
one of our representatives.
She is a Tennessean and she is a Christian, and she doesn't feel like this person represents either of those things for her.
Okay. Well, great news, man. We get to talk about this for like 8 more months. And then the nice thing is elections are over the very next day. It's great. We just go back to normal.
Yeah. No one talks about it ever again.
I know. Oh, anyway, hopefully we'll still be around. Until next time, friends, thank you for tuning in. We love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. The Voxology Podcast is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is made possible by listeners just like you. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Voxology Podcast or on Tithely, tithe.ly, search Voxology Podcast. You can interact with the hosts on Facebook /Voxology Podcast, or on Instagram at Voxology Podcast, and on Twitter or X, whatever it is, at Mike Erre. Thank you for walking this long road with us.